It's an hour before dawn, but the tropical forest is far from still. The myriad of insects creates a polyphony of sound, finding space in the chorus so that they can be heard by their potential rivals and mates. They are joined by the Baka women, singing their signature Yeli, an otherworldly yodel that they believe communicates with the spirits of past hunters who will herd the forest animals to their husbands' spears over the coming days. My name is Martin Cradick. I've been visiting the same Baka community for 30 years now, drawn there after having heard their music on a television documentary. Having arrived, I was entranced by their world, the music, the laughter, their joy of life. The spell was so strong that after 30 years I still have to go back each year. Watching the documentary Baka, People of the Rainforest by Phil Agland, I loved the way the Baka appeared to incorporate music in all aspects of their lives, and was particularly impressed by a girl playing what looked like a giant leaf. I was so inspired that I picked up my guitar and wrote a riff that became the title track of the next album of my band, Outback, which we called Baka. Not only did this lead to me getting my first record deal with Joe Boyd's Hannibal Records, but also a series of coincidences that 2 years later found me walking down a forest path at dusk with my wife Sue, carrying a sack of salt, a guitar and a mandolin, and a present of Marks & Spencer's ladies' knickers, a prized item we were assured, following a little Baka man called Mopana into the darkening forest. In this series of podcasts, I'll try to connect all that I've recently read about the Baka and their music in the academic literature with my extensive collection of field recordings and my 30 years of experience living and working with Baka musicians. I will show how music and dance is central to their lives, how they keep the social and emotional health of the community strong, how they are a communication with the forest and a technology of enchantment. To give you an idea of just how musical they are, here are 3 young Baka women playing the river. You can see they really are the masters of syncopation and polyrhythm. So who are the Baka? The Baka are one of many indigenous groups living in the tropical rainforests of the Congo Basin. Scattered across the forests from the Atlantic coast of Gabon and Cameroon to the mountains of Uganda and Burundi, they were called Pygmies by Victorian explorers due to their small size. Others include their neighbours the Aka, the Bongo and the Gweli, as well as the Mbuti, Efe and Twa from the eastern Congo Basin. In spite of their wide distribution, they share certain core values: egalitarianism, reliance on the forest for food, medicine, shelter and spiritual well-being, and an extraordinary aptitude for music. The polyphonic singing, such as this 1958 recording by Colin Turnbull of the Ituri forest people singing an elephant hunting song, is heard amongst all the groups across the forest. Although it is quite different from the Baka women singing at the start of this podcast, when both Lewis and Kisliuk played it to the Aka, they both reported that they immediately recognised it, saying, "They must be like us because they sing like us." The Aka and the Baka are the most closely related of the Pygmy groups, in spite of having completely different languages. They both have a two-stringed musical bow only played by women, called Limbindi by Baka and Ngbiti by the Aka. This was the instrument that I saw in Phil Agland's film that I thought was a giant leaf. In fact, it was a giant ngongo leaf wrapped around the Limbindi to reflect the sound back to the player. Although Nahwia here is playing it on an upturned cooking pot. The Aka women would use this as a spiritual bridge between women and their husbands, while the latter were away on hunting trips. I've not asked the Baka about this, but this recording is of Nahwia playing in a forest camp on her own, while her husband, Ndongo, was off hunting. In spite of the Eastern and Western groups separating 30,000 years ago, the Efe in the East also play an instrument like this. They call it kitingbi, and it's part of the young women's initiation ceremony. It may still be part of that ceremony amongst the Baka, but as a man and not privy to women's initiations, I've only seen it played in camp. It's the only instrument I know where the player's chin is used to change the pitch of the notes. In Baka mythology, the Ngòmbi Nà Péké is the demiurge Komba's instrument. Traditionally, it accompanies the Likano, creation tales that entertain and educate the children. Pellenbeer will explain.
I'll tell you about the Ngòmbi Nà Péké. Kumba showed us how to make Ngòmbi Nà Péké. When men play, they play the same songs as when the Baka women sing the Yeli. The Ngòmbi Nà Péké and the Yeli follow each other. It is good.
In preparing these podcasts, I've revisited my field recordings, some of which I haven't heard for 25 years. I find I now hear them very differently. When I recorded Bounaka playing this piece in 1992, I really didn't understand all the percussion. Now, when I listen to the recordings, I can imagine the pulse that often is not actually being played, and the rhythms make much more sense to me. I'll put in the pulse to make the rhythm clearer. You can easily hear what Furniss calls the African standard pattern, which is equivalent to the Cuban 12/8 clave. But like all things Baka, although there are underlying rules, or rather underlying patterns, they will always only use them as a guide, and do their own thing. Except for repertoires borrowed from or shared with neighbours, all Aka and Baka music is based on a ternary metricity, the beat being subdivided into 3 minimal values. We heard it in the recording of Bounaka playing the Ngòmbi Nà Péké, and here where Metouli with his Aita is singing Djin Djang. This is the underlying rhythm to most of the Baka's traditional dances. These rhythms may sound unfamiliar to us, but the Baka start to learn them before they learn to talk. In fact, they start to learn them before they are born. A 24-week-old fetus hears the world around its mother, who will be regularly singing, dancing, moving to the rhythm and clapping. The endorphins the experience produces in her are shared with the fetus, so powerful associations between these sounds and pleasure are established in utero. Once born, the immersion in rhythms and melodies continues. Music is learnt in the same way as language. No one actively teaches, but as in most things, the Baka learn by observation, imitation, and repetition. In part 2, I'll use a recording of a Bwambwa dance, or Be, to show how the Baka learn to use music and dance to communicate with and affect the forest.